So for any fans of Sparring who coincidentally are also fans of Kuroki Gensai, although I'm guessing there's a lot more fans for Kuroki, so it is what it is there, y'all are eating good in this chapter. Seeing what both characters, and of course a lot more other characters, what they're up to has been kind of good. Even though I know a lot of people want to get to the battle royale, I think that this is one of the better chapters that is a part of the actual build-up. But let's go straight into the chapter that is called Regrets. Now, it's a little bit hard to find out where the title actually applies. This one seems like a lot more of a more subtle title in terms of where exactly it applies, because there are a few cases to think of, but I'll cover that in the actual breakdown of the chapter, which starts off with a boat or a little ship being in the middle of the ocean, and it also seems like it's stopping as well. Kuroki Gensai, he's on this ship or this boat, and the driver just happens to also be Karo. And Karo steps out at this point once the boat has actually just stopped for a bit, and he basically confirms that they've arrived at the location. And Karo starts explaining like, yeah, I know it looks kind of normal for now, like the ocean does kind of look normal, but this is actually called the Devil's Sea. And Karo, he begins to elaborate on why it's called the Devil's Sea, other than the fact that, well, it's a good pun for Kuroki, the devil lands, let's say. Rumor has it that there is a very important resource, mineral, whatever it is, underneath the ocean at this location. The problem is that it's caught between borders. So what has actually happened here is that there's a lot of countries that are trying to claim ownership of the area so that they can get the actual resource. And the result of this is that you have warships that are basically patrolling around the area, and in some cases trade ships that are actually warships. They are basically the sky. So battle happens here occasionally is what Karo says. So instead of a full-on war happening in whatever year this is or century this is, what we have is more like a tug of war. A few skirmishes here and there, and people trying to make sure that no one actually gets access to the mineral or the resource. And so this is a very interesting situation here, because I want to talk about the type of training that this might actually end up being for Kuroki Gensai, but let me hold off a bit on that, because Kuroki, he thanks Karo for being, for taking him all the way here, but he also warns Karo to, hey, it's time to run away, because, things are about to go down here. Kuroki didn't come here to have another picnic. And we see here Kuroki, he's on his little lifeboat, and he's not even rowing the lifeboat at this point, because it has like its own little paddle thingies there. He's just standing up, arms folded, the wind flapping, his coat, flapping as well. My man is just being a badass, He saw Sun Jin Woo and Piccolo and was like, I bet. But as he's standing there, and this is very interesting, it could either be that the air becomes a lot more intense because we see the panels start to get darker, or what is kind of a little bit funny in this case, that being Kuroki Gensai literally stood there for hours, because it's broad daylight when he stands and it's nighttime when we see a ship coming his way, and it is a warship, and Kuroki Gensai says, let the duel begin. And so my man has literally, he's going to be challenging warships, because we know multiple countries are beefing over the area. So this is not going to be the only one. There are probably multiple coming. But what does this simulation kind of look like? It does look like the upcoming battle royale that we are going to see. This confirms that Kuroki Gensai is going to be entering the tournament, because we have the button, just like there is this little mineral resource that is kind of like the MacGuffin or the token of the fight that needs to be protected. So Kuroki sort of laying claim to the resource and the area, and he's going to be making sure that no one gets a hold of it or probably try to take it for himself. This also helps with, of course, fighting a warship means fighting its crew. Multiple people are going to be involved. I think this also confirms what I've been saying for a while, that being that the worm will more than likely enter with as many members as possible. This training kind of assumes that there's going to be a lot of people involved. So Kuroki Gensai, this, just like how Koga and Ryuki's training just so coincidentally benefits them for the upcoming upcoming battle royale. So in the same way with Kuroki, with what he's trying to do here, still kind of wild that he's fighting in the middle of the ocean on a lifeboat, bro, against warships. What would be funnier is, other than this of course being inevitably compared to what Yujiro has done before, because as I've covered before, Baki scaling and Kengan scaling are going to be looking very similar to one another, because realistically speaking, Baki is kind of crazy, but it's not that crazy. It's not Kyoretsu Isekai crazy yet. There's some form of groundedness, and what I mean by this is that there is ultimately a limit to how crazy things can get, and the rest is just a little bit of weird things to basically have in your series. But that's enough of that. It was a fun little portion of the chapter, great way to kick off the chapter in my opinion, but that's the end of the scene because we transition over to Kiozan's Sumo stable and he's training with Amai Cosmo here. Kiozan's like, bring it on, and Cosmo, he tries to charge straight at him and he manages to tackle Kiozan. Of course, Kiozan grabs him sumo style, right, basically tossing him to his right side, and you see Cosmo, he's being thrown, he's rolling like a bum. Kiozan, after his roll, or the momentum for his roll actually stopped, he's like, look, you gotta go harder than that. You gotta put your weight and strength behind your tackle so that you're not, thrown aside as Kiozan just did. And he's sort of hyped up. He's saying this energized, smacking, his shoulders, and he's like, bro, Cosmo. And Cosmo, he gets up and he's like, alright, let's do it again. And he charges at him again. So we see here that they're training with each other. Cosmo's trying to basically improve his grappling, and this is really good because he can improve his tackles and the strength behind what he's actually doing, because if he can actually put up a decent fight grappling wise against Kiozan, there's very few people who can or who will be able to resist Cosmo trying to choke them out or tackle. But then we focus on two sumo wrestlers that are behind Kiozan, or they're watching this little sparring match go on, and they comment on how Kiozan's mood has improved tremendously since Cosmo has sort of come to spar with him to learn from him. And so he's very hyped up, he's ready to go basically, and I wonder if we'll actually see Kiozan in the actual battle royale. I think we have a good chance of actually seeing that. But the sumo wrestlers, they comment and they're like, look, this is definitely a big help to Cosmo. I've already explained why, but for Kiozan, he gets to improve because he gets to increase his knowledge through teaching Cosmo. So this does kind of buff the both of them in this way. Kiozan gets to learn more with this new teaching experience, with this mentorship that he's doing here, and Cosmo gets to improve as well. But that being said, the two sumo wrestlers go to join in on the training and sparring matches as well, and that's the end of that scene featuring Cosmo and Kiozan catching up on what they were doing. At this point, you get the trend, just like every other chapter before this for this arc. Is basically the training build-up arc for the battle royale. But the next scene is at the village of the dawn, where we see what seems like an empty village and Swapang chilling with Gaolang. And Swapang is like, hey, what does he think of the village? Taking a good look at it, and Gaolang mentions like it looks like his home. Probably the same home that he has with the king or the prince, and probably not the one that he was fighting in when he was in poverty fighting for his life, right? But what's very interesting here, and remind me if I'm wrong about this, wasn't the village kind of struggling? Swapang's village? It seems like they've probably improved ever since, what was happening with Ashra and what was going on with them. And so if that's the case, then that's kind of good to see that they've sort of have a better quality of life, right? But Swapang and Gaolang, they're sort of walking alongside each other and talk as well. Because if you saw the panel, especially in the official chapter, you don't see any villagers there. And Gaolang asks about that, other villagers out. He basically replies, yeah, they are out. They wanted to throw you a party, welcoming you in, so they're going to prepare that. But they get to a certain spot and Gaolang's like, okay, so this place is good, and Saw's like, yeah, it's a good place. And at this point, we know what's about to happen. They're about to spar here. Gaolang says, let's get started. Saw's like, let's go. They both get stanced up, and Saw is the first one obviously to charge straight in, and they both unleash punches at each other. For Gaolang it's his right hand, for Saw it is also his right hand, but Saw's punch is at a different angle, so it goes beneath because he sort of went for a lower charge at Gaolang, so he's sort of hitting upwards at Gaolang, and we see Gaolang's attack did not land on Saw, like at all. No one was there, but Saw's attack lands on Gaolang, but not on his face, even though it looked like it. Instead, it hit his hand that actually went right before the impact on his face, and Gaolang, he's shocked. He's shocked because he's like, wow, his attack actually outmatched his prediction. Or yeah, it actually outdid his prediction. This is very interesting because if you actually think that Gaolang has pre-initiative, that means that Saw is basically close enough to where Gaolang is with blitzing pre-initiative. He's getting there. But my guess is that this trend won't be too strong because we've seen a similar thing happen with Kuroki Gensai, where he was sort of caught off guard at first, but once he had sort of calculated for the new upgrade in speed, it just became a wash from there. And this is the problem with the S tiers. Once they get used to what you're doing, everything you do is basically input reading at that point, and they have the speed to know what you're doing at that point, unless you're like basically Gaolang, or at this point Koga, because Koga can actually blitz pre-initiative right now. He just uses the fist eye instead. But with that, Saw is basically like, yep, I'm not letting you get ahead of me at all, cause I am Saw Frepan, bruh. And that's it. That's the chapter. Hype way to end off, hype way to start. Gaolang fans need to chill out a little bit more. It's not the end of the world. We do know everyone is getting strong, and I do think we're going to see a lot of things get shaken up, or at least the status quo be shaken up a lot. It's already been shaked up with Shen Wulong and the Worm Heads, but we're getting an even bigger shake where people are gonna start getting to certain levels and certain tiers of power that you wouldn't think they would be able to get to at this point. But yeah, that's the video. Don't forget to like and sub, and until next time, take it easy.